But first, Australia's energy insanity is going from bad to worse at the very time when households are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. Less than a fortnight after 1.5 million plus Victorian homes and businesses were blacked out, partly because wind and solar power couldn't ramp up when a weather event triggered a power outage, the Victorian government has just passed legislation through the state's lower house to move to 95% renewable power by 2035. And for a state that's built its prosperity on cheap and reliable power of coal and gas, it will now have to completely transform its grid, all within about a decade, from one where 60% of Victoria's power is generated by coal to one where 95% is wind and solar. Even though we need power 24/7, not just when the wind blows and the sun shines. And even though there's not the slightest bit of evidence that the state could import all the Chinese wind turbines and solar panels needed in that time, or roll out transmission lines to connect it all up. And that's before you consider whether it could even be adequately firmed if actually built. The Australian Energy Market Operator, AEMO, estimates that Australia needs to have around 57 gigawatts of renewable generation installed by 2030 to meet all the current targets. And that means more than tripling now our existing capacity. And that's before we consider that latest madness, the green dream, out of Victoria. The Federal Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, has previously admitted that Labor's current target requires the installation of 22,000 solar panels every single day, 40 large wind turbines every single month, plus the construction of at least 10,000 kilometres of new transmission lines by 2030. Now, as you know, nothing like this is happening. But the biggest coal-fired power station in the country is set to shut down next year, then the second biggest about 3 years later than that. Around the world, countries that went down the renewables path and sacrificed coal and gas, well, they're fast winding that back. Many, as you know, are moving in the direction of nuclear power as well. But here at home, Labor still pretends it can meet pie-in-the-sky targets because it's in a fight with the Greens for the left-leaning voter. Now, it doesn't matter what the reality is. It doesn't matter that your power bill is crippling your family's budget, or that the Prime Minister's promise to cut your power bill by $275 a year is now meaningless. You are hurting. And that's before Labor comes after the car you drive and the meat on your plate as well. But what about Labor's great hypocrisy revealed last week, where taxpayers are on the hook to the tune of $900 million plus because the Albanese government is forced to subsidise coal-fired power generators just to keep the lights on. This, of course, is the same Labor Party that demonises coal day in, day out. As I said, madness. Magic pudding economics. We're drowning in debt to get emissions down, buying 90% of our wind turbines and solar panels from China, while they burn our coal and increase their emissions year on year. But as bad as Labor is, it's the Victorian Liberal Opposition that deserves condemnation tonight. And that's because when the Victorian Labor Party, the government, rammed its new 95% renewables target through the Parliament's lower house late last Thursday night, well, the Victorian Liberals just waved it through. Absolutely passed it over. It was not opposed in any way by the Victorian LINOs. Liberals in name only. So much for John Pesutto's hollow words about sticking up for households and businesses hit by the state's power blackouts just days before. So much for saying that Victorian Liberals were on the side of families battling cost of living. What absolutely weak surrender monkeys these LINO MPs are. Is it any wonder they're almost in permanent opposition? And if you're not in Victoria, though, don't think this isn't coming to a state near you. Because, pardon the pun, my home state is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to electricity.